Well, good morning, guys, or afternoon, or wherever you all are. Today we're going to have, we're starting our IPM series from, we did a few of these in the June timeframe, and now we're going to do a series of them from September through the end of October. Today we're going to get a pitch from Dan Melamed for Earned Value Management for Operations. But what I want to do is I've got a few announcements I'd like to give first. First of all, want to let everybody know that EVM World 2021, which was scheduled for November 4th and 5th, is canceled. We canceled it because we did a survey of our members and sponsors and companies and that sort of thing, and most people are unable to travel either by corporate restriction or personal choice. It's just not only that, but Florida is quite a hot spot these days. So we're canceling it, but we're looking at some alternatives, some form of mini virtual conference, not like IPM-WV where it was a bit more full blown, but, a few workshops, maybe some PEP training, maybe continued IPM series. Can everybody please shut their videos down, please, except for the speaker? Appreciate it. And then, we'll have about a mid-September announcement. I did want to introduce some new board members. I'm not sure if they're actually on or not, but this year we had a transition of some board members. Bob Loop is the VP of Education and Training. He came in probably about the May timeframe. Rebecca Winston is the VP of Membership, and she's stepping in temporarily because we didn't have a VP of Membership. They had resigned, but she will also be running for that position coming up here in the elections. And then Daryl Mesa, who is the VP of Digital Presence, which is actually a new vice president position that we have, that we created this year. So if everybody could shut their video down except for the speakers, please, I'd sure appreciate it. Okay, so the next slide is the series through 4th of November. First of all, the CPM is doing this collaboratively with EVA from the UK. And so we're doing weekly webinars. Every other week is CPMs, and the CPMs one, we've got this one today, and then we've got cross-functional IPM analysis coming up. Technical performance measures, and we're actually talking with some Turkish system engineering community there. CP, knowledge management, how that relates or could relate, and then look at the DECA metrics. And EVA, again, they'll be doing every other week, and building a better project manager, and then there's a conversation club, systems thinking, storytelling, and then project people of world event. So those are weekly. Just wanted to let you know that these are going to be on our website with the appropriate links. And then also please register. So that would be awesome. So thank you very much. Okay, so let's transfer to today's pitch. And if you have any questions, just do the raise your hand deal here in Teams. But Dan Melamed, his biography, joined federal government, Department of Energy in 2001, organized, directed, and participated in environmental baseline reviews for a wide variety of sites across the EM complex. Most recently, the EM Los Alamos Integrated Baseline Review. Organizer and co-lead, final report issued 2021. Certified cost professional, earned value professional, member of the AACE International Technical Board since 2011, named a fellow of AACE in 2020. And something you don't know about Dan is he's an alumnus of Stuyvesant High School in the city of New York. And I probably hacked that name up, so I apologize. So Dan, I'll turn my video off and turn it over to you, and I'll stop sharing. Okay? Sounds great.
All right. All is good. All right. First of all, thank you, Gordon. And
hey, Gigi, my name is Michelle Belvin, and I have an appointment on the books for tomorrow. I had written wrong as next week.
Excuse me?
Can I reschedule that?
Excuse me? Can you everybody put on mute so that we can do our thing here?
Okay. Once again, thank you, Gordon. And first and foremost, the high school is Stuyvesant. It is known to many folks from the New York City area. Greetings all. I want to thank you, Gordon, and thank you as the membership of the College of Performance Management to invite me and to host this presentation. I am quite grateful and quite humbled by this attention to this topic, which I view as key and important to the global program and project management. Overall, here is a summary of my presentation. I will discuss, in the highest level, earned value management for operations and its requirements for federal baselines. Also, I am discussing some issues that were pointed out by the Government Accountability Office and findings that they have within my programs office, and in particular in the issues of project and program management. I am going to give my best definition for what defines a capital project versus operations activities, and the role of operations activity in life cycle cost estimating. And I have to emphasize this will be discussed again later on. By life cycle cost, I mean the life cycle cost of the capital asset, not simply the life cycle cost of the project. I will also discuss specific topics, considerations for creating a worthwhile EVM system that accurately measures the cost and schedule for earned value activities for operations. And this includes discussion or emphasis on production metrics to measure earned value, and the challenges of minimizing level of effort, as well as tailoring in the earned value management system, followed by conclusions. As Gordon had pointed out before, please raise your hand, and I highly encourage you to ask questions as time allows for this meeting, for this presentation. And I will be giving you my email address where we can hopefully continue the dialogue afterwards. What does an earned value management system provide? More or less, an earned value management system helps the owner and the contractor manage scope, manage risks. It creates an understanding of an organization breakdown structure. It helps with an understanding of the work breakdown structure, what is to be done, as well as the schedule, the budget, the goals of the specific project or operations appropriate to this talk. And as risks are realized, because no project or program operates perfectly, you will have recovery plans as you fall behind or accelerate. How do you best exploit opportunities and advantages? And also to make forecasts. Are you behind schedule? Are you ahead of schedule? And how is your cost and operations going throughout? And once again, these are the paradigms of an earned value management system curve. You deal with the variances at the budget at completion, or the estimated completion versus the budget at completion, versus the schedule variances. Let me open the forum. There are no questions, so no one's hand is raised at this point. All right. To begin, a lot of our efforts in the Department of Energy Environmental Management Program began with a government accountability study where they looked at the environmental management program, and they had a focus on looking at operations. Now, you can see by the graph below, if you look at any particular budget year, less than 20% of the activities in the Department of Energy is dedicated to capital asset construction. Meanwhile, over 3/4 of the budget is dedicated to operations. GAO issued the report that stated, titled rather, DOE can improve program and project management by better classifying work and following leading practices, which had two major findings. Until EM revises its cleanup policy to follow leading practices, EM's operation activities are at risk of uncontrolled changes to scope, exceeding initial budget and schedule, and failing to meet their original goals. In particular, one of their findings involving earned value management was EM's performance measures for operations activities do not provide a clear picture of overall performance. EM has not followed best practices for its contractors' EVM systems. So ultimately, the EM program, the Department of Energy's environmental cleanup program.
Say, Dan, I just had a quick question.
Please.
So if you go back one slide there. So what's interesting is, so GAO, because typically, at least in the DoD, we typically apply earned value management to this fullest extent on development programs, not operations or maintenance, that kind of thing. But yet, is GAO saying that EVM applies to operations? Is that why you chose to do it? Or did you choose to use EVM because you just felt it was a good practice to try to get a handle on cost and schedule?
This varied throughout the EM program. Earned value management has been applied to some operations activities, but not universally.
Okay.
On the most positive sense, there's no one size fits all, which is one of the points we will be discussing in detail later on. But EVM is used for many of the operations activities. It is not universally applied.
All right.
And there are other means that were discussed in this report, including corporate performance measures as well as milestones, which could be incorporated or may be incorporated throughout the EM program. But once again, appropriate to the findings of the GAO, they found all of the methodologies applied to measure performance in the EM program were not quite meeting their goals.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, can everybody shut their video down unless you're presenting? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, thank you. I look forward to see how you ended up choosing to implement it.
Okay. Well, what important qualifier, this is a work in progress. So, and this is part of why we're reaching out and we're discussing earned value for operations, because we are seeking the best methodology, the best lessons learned in order for us to best apply it moving forward. We have this point in time, but we are seeking better practices and better means by which we can use EVM.
Excellent. You came to the right place.
Thank you. We certainly hope so. Now, part of this is appropriate to what GAO is investigating. They're discussing the distinction between capital and operations. It's best for all of us to get a clear understanding What do we talk about when we talk about capital projects, and what do we talk about when we are discussing operations? So within the government's rubric, we find the following general high-level discussions of what is a capital asset. We have OMB Circular A11, Capital Programming Guide, which defines capital assets as follows. Capital assets are land, including parkland, structures, equipment, including motor and aircraft fleets, and intellectual property, including software, which are used by the federal government and have an estimated useful life of 2 years or more. This is extended, and if I can be parochial, I am looking in particular at environmental cleanup, where they go further and define the issues in detail as capital assets include environmental remediation of land to make it useful, leasehold improvements and land rights assets owned by the federal government but located in a foreign country or held by others as federal contractors, state and local governments and colleges and universities, as well as assets whose ownership is shared by the federal government and other entities. Forgive me if I mangled it, but it's a mouthful. But essentially, when you deal with federal land or land which has been used or leased by the federal government, when you are bettering the land, improving upon the land, or remediating the land, that is also counted as a capital asset. To once again go further down, and this was a pattern we have found when we were looking within ourselves, that the definitions stated within the federal government are elaborated upon and specified within the specific missions and requirements of the Department of Energy. Just as in general, federal law, federal statute, federal guidance is elaborated upon and specified as per specific requirements within local jurisdictions and mission requirements. So the definition of operations activities within the Department of Energy are such things as infrastructure maintenance, safeguards and security, emergency management, technology, research and development, as well as deployment, community support, public outreach, regulatory support, as well as project and program management. Now, once again, to get to specific examples, and this is by no means an absolute and exhaustive list, but some examples that are applicable to environmental cleanup, retrieval, stabilization, packaging, storage, transport, and disposition of waste, and once again, specific to the Department of Energy's mission, nuclear materials. Very often we deal with radioactive waste and nuclear materials. The operation and remediation of systems, groundwater treatment, soil remediation, what is often colloquially referred to as muck and truck, where you excavate contaminated lands and either ship them out for disposal or treat them either via soil washing or other technologies for cleanup and disposition, once again for the betterment of the land. Long-term environmental stewardship, this was often institutional controls, maintaining a secure perimeter, as well as pump and treat and ongoing monitoring activities. And lastly, facility shutdown and deactivation. Once a facility has reached the end of its useful life, you start dealing with its deactivation, you are preparing it for eventual disposition and demolition. All right, are there any questions at this point? All right, I will continue. Operations are an important aspect of the life cycle of a capital asset. So once again, you very often, many people, many programs are preoccupied with capital asset construction. You are building the asset, you are building the facility for use to the program's mission. However, very often you have operations activities that occur after the construction of the facility is completed. You do a transition to operations and you operate for years, if not decades. And then, as I have stated before, you deal with deactivation and then finally usually demolition as the facility nears the end of its life cycle. And D&D is the colloquial term, but very often it deals with either 60s or 70s, but the most exhaustive definition I have found is decommissioning, deactivation, decontamination, demolition, dismantlement, and disposition. Disposition, you do not count that facility as done until you dispose of all of its resultant waste. This is very often referred to as D&D, which is more often a term of art. Now, once again, as distinct from what many folks refer to as the life cycle of a project, which would only be this portion of the construction, you often deal with the capital asset life cycle. And this becomes important when you start viewing a program's activities in any one of a number of times, number of cases. And in this case, I've created a notional slide. This is, Rebecca, I see your hand is up. Let me finish this point and we can deal with your question. Very often you deal with a life cycle of a program which deals with the construction and operations of many assets, as well as specific site operations, as well as the specific contract development, execution, and handoffs, as well as out-year planning. When you review a program, you tend to do so in a specific time frame and for specific reasons. But very often it is helpful to view what goes on during the review period with an eye towards the longer term life cycle repercussions. Rebecca, your question?
Yeah, having worked with the environmental management program at various times,
Sure.
One thing that I'm curious about is you talked about setting up the life cycle cost for the capital program and operations. How often is that reviewed? Because as we know in DOE, projections are oft times exceeded due to various issues and risks that occur. And many of these life cycles are 30, 40 years out. So how often are those reviewed?
Excellent question. I would comment, and it's a good, it as a qualifier, 10 to 20 to 30 years in many cases is kind. Many of these life cycles extend decades more. As a minimum, the projects and programs look at aspects of their life cycle as a minimum annually. But once again, this is something which is viewed very much on a case-by-case basis. I cannot say that there is a formal specific review of all aspects of all the life cycle. But as an example, the EM program's environmental liability, which is very much a life cycle estimate done from a liability actuarial standpoint, is done annually. And the sites throughout their budget planning processes do analyze their life cycle costs annually as they are planning each budget cycle. But the specifics vary from project to project, case by case, program by program. Does that help address your question?
It does. Part of the reason I asked is when I did a review for Jim Rispoli, there was a lot of issues having to do with maintenance that kept getting deferred. And it was never captured in the life cycle cost as actually increasing in cost as you defer maintenance.
And that is an excellent point. By the way, in the spirit of full disclosure, when Rebecca was working with the Department of Energy, we did overlap, and we have worked together before. It's good seeing you and good talking with you again all these
Thank
years later. We are seeking to get a better handle on the surveillance and maintenance activities and how they incorporate into the life cycle analysis. I would add that not to engage too much in jargon, but OMB Circular A94, or very often budget processes where one may go to Congress or discuss with stakeholders activities that may cost more upfront or may involve greater cost and effort early in the life cycle, may result in a reduced overall life cycle cost. And thank you very much, Rebecca, for that question, because that dovetails very neatly into this slide. So accurate life cycle cost estimates are used to determine future year budget needs. So when you are discussing from a local standpoint, what have you gotten done in the previous year, and you are planning for the coming year, the best practices appropriate to GAO's findings on the Department of Energy are that we should be looking a bit more at how operations play out and how this plays out within the future year budget needs and our life cycle costing analysis. It also helps us prioritize work activities. If you don't focus on one activity, this may result in steadily and strongly increased costs in the future from various other programs. As Rebecca pointed out, if you defer maintenance too long, you get system failure, you get facility failure. This is something you do not want to deal with unless the project and the utility of those facilities is ending. I would add also, sorry about that. I would add also that this is baked in or part of existing legislation. Very often the environmental management program operates within the legislation of the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, better known as CERCLA. And by the way, this is a very good justification of why we use that acronym. So within the regulatory framework, the criteria for selecting how one cleans up a project or an environmental cleanup site is done with a logic towards life cycle costing. Do you leave the radioactive waste or toxic waste in place and just put a protective mound and monitor it indefinitely? Or do you excavate the waste straight off at a greater initial cost, but with a reduced life cycle cost? And with this in mind, I bring up the point that maintaining a rigorous EVMS for operations activity is a good means for both measuring the costs, maintaining a good cost control of operations activities, as well as a tool to help archive historical records to better estimate operations costs for future projects. And this goes to Gordon's original question about, well, what is the EM program doing? I would put forward, then once again, this is just my opinion at this point, that good use of EVM through more of the operations activities can serve the program overall well in helping control operations costs, as well as creating an archive of actual operating costs for future projects. Now, once again, this is a qualifier. I'm not speaking on behalf of the EM program. I am just stating what I believe to be a good personal opinion.
Hey, Gary, can you please shut off your video and your audio? Can you shut off your video as well, Gary? Okay, Dan, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. One of the better means, if we are to start establishing good criteria for potentially capturing more operations activities through earned value management, is the possibility of using earned value management for operations activities as production. So very often after the completing the construction of a facility, there is a transition to operations. And very often this involves production activities. This, I believe, is where an EVMS can be readily applied. Some examples, and we have examined this and both outside the Department of Energy. A good example is the demilitarization program, the destruction of chemical weapons. And there are several facilities, some of which have completed their work, but some of the work that's ongoing is at Pueblo, Colorado, the Bluegrass Chemical Agent Disposal Pilot Plant near Richmond, Kentucky, and the Umatilla Chemical Agent Demilitarization Facility in Oregon. Now, these facilities have ongoing activities where they take chemical weapons, ordnance, which are loaded with nerve gas, which is highly toxic, highly deadly material, and they deactivate both the UXO, the unexploded ordnance, as well as destroying the chemical agent. Examples of production facilities within the Department of Energy involve general activities such as radioactive waste stabilization and disposition. Arguably one of the more famous or more prominent examples are the Defense Waste Processing Facility at Idaho Falls, as well as the Salt Waste Processing Facility at Aiken, South Carolina. Both of those are dedicated to the processing of liquid, radioactive liquid waste. And some of them are ongoing operations where you develop high-level waste canisters produced, and you have a readily measurable metric, numbers of canisters, which you take the liquid radioactive waste, vitrify it in at least the case of the Defense Waste Processing Facility. Actually, I'd like to point out an error. The Defense Waste Processing Facility is also in Aiken, South Carolina. There is a different facility at Idaho, which also will process liquid waste. But once again, the Defense Waste Processing Facility in Aiken, South Carolina, takes liquid waste, vitrifies it into a glass log, takes the glass log and stores it for eventual disposal in a geologic repository. Another example is the Moab uranium mill tailings facility, where you take uranium mill tailings, package it, and dispose of it in a certified RCRA, or rather a certified disposal cell, which is suitable for uranium mill tailings. Lastly, we have the Advanced Mixed Waste Treatment Project, AMWTP, in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And that facility takes drums of transuranic waste, which is a unique variety of radioactive waste, characterizes it, packages it for disposal at the waste isolation pilot plant in Carlsbad, New Mexico, for permanent disposal. Any questions? Any points? All right.
Say, Dan, Wendy Hilton had her hand up for a while, and then she took it back down. So I don't know, Wendy, did you have a question?
No, that's an accident because I'm not really good at that whole top bar at Teams. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, that's okay.
This is a great conversation. I'm enjoying this.
Thank you much. Yeah, even electronically, one's hand can get tired. So yeah, please. Once again, this is a notional table of waste. I am not specifying the variety of waste. I am not specifying any site, but I'm just emphasizing if you are dealing with production of some sort, you can readily set things up to allow for an earned value management system. So once again, you have metric targets for waste disposal, whether it is disposition, characterization, treatment. This is an example within a notional, within a, at least as a thought experiment, you have dedicated targets by month for a specific site. It can be listed cumulatively, where you take the monthly target and then you add it and you have a cumulative total, in this case 250 units, and the unit of choice is cubic meters. You have the specifics of a contract period where you, and once again, this is notional, 250 cubic meters per year. And then you have a life cycle estimate appropriate to Becky's question, to Rebecca's question, where you have a long life cycle, 25 years, and you have a whole lot of radioactive, or rather waste, to deal with. And the specific contract period deals with a chunk of it. This, I believe, is also pointing out one of the challenges of dealing with operations. If you're dealing with a capital asset, you construct the facility throughout, and very often it does not take more than a specified amount of time. When you deal with operations, you tend to deal with a much more protracted amount of time when compared to capital asset construction. You have decades, and you very often could have multiple decades. And once again, appropriate to what Becky had pointed out, how do you deal with surveillance and maintenance? How do you deal with year-end results when you either did better or worse than the original target? Do you pull in waste that you could process if things went well? Do you push out the targets for the coming year? How does one deal with contract management? These are all issues that need to be addressed, and any one of them can be the subject of yet another talk. These are non-trivial issues that I'm pointing out within this notional slide, but it points out both the most hopeful, where if you set things up with reasonable and adequate targets to which one may start operating activities, you can set up an earned value management system with an estimate at completion, with scheduled performance, and then you can start taking earned value and measure actuals, both in terms of schedule, in terms of cost, and develop an earned value system, report upon it, require management action, all of the things for which earned value serves both the contractor and the owner well. Okay, let me open the floor. Are there any questions, any thoughts, any comments, any disagreements? Okay.
I guess you're just providing all the answers, Dan. The one-stop shop.
I put forward the issues and such.
Yeah, that's a question. Patrick Milliken?
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
Please.
What did you leverage from NDIA? I know back in 2011 they put out an EVM in a production environment. And do you know if NDIA is working on updating that guidance and in recognition of the effort that EM's trying to make here?
Okay. First of all, thank you. Excellent question. The short answer is no. NDIA has produced a white paper a number of years back, and they produced a follow-on, an adjunct to the white paper, but they have not produced an actual guide. And if nothing else, I would like to hear from them or see whether they, this need from GAO. And I'm certain if this is low, this particular report focuses on the Department of Energy, I can only imagine that there are other areas in government where this could be useful, or dare I say, the private sector, where production is an important part of manufacturing and industry. So I have not seen anything extra other than the white papers, but I would really like to see some follow-on activity or something from NDIA on this topic. So thank you for an excellent question. I wish I had a better answer other than there is a second white paper out there by NDIA. Any follow-on points or follow-on questions? Okay. One point. Oh, Daria, you have a question? Hi there.
Yes. Hi. I'm just trying to think about how this might apply to us at the Department of Education. We don't tend to have very many capital programs that are land related, but what we do have are system related, where we're building that system and then doing continuous improvement on it, especially now in the DevSecOps world, where they are continuously monitoring metrics to determine what's the next thing to tweak and improve for some of our customer facing websites. And it seems to me that, and it's in that weird place where it's development but operations too, kind of world. And it feels like something like how you were showing the number of places cleaned up, kind of the widget production widget kind of thing might be how to apply EVM in that DevSecOps world a little bit.
Good question. I hesitate. Well, okay. The most naive belief would be that, one size fits all, or these general points are universally applicable. And I think this is one of the reasons why EVM for operations has not taken on more prominence than it has than when compared to, let's say, capital construction or capital asset improvement or software development, to give a localized example. For cases like the Department of Energy, I'm sorry, the other DOE, the Department of Education, I cannot address the specifics, but it comes down to, if you have measurable outcomes and you can say, look, for the operation of the education facility, and I apologize deeply if I'm misstating the local issues, but or the local nomenclature. You have specific goals for these activities, and you can either improve or put forward changes and measure directly if these are improvements to the program. I stammer because I
So
don't
Dan,
know.
can I add a thought or two here? This is Gordon Kranz.
Please.
Okay. Yeah. So the point that I'm getting out of all of this is that, EVM has some fundamental principles, the most important of which are understanding technical measures and how to progress them. Operations, sustainment, manufacturing, all of those things do have, and you mentioned it, it has measures that they're tracking. Well, is it exactly earned value the way, the most rigorous, compliant, whatever? Probably not. But every contract is going to have some kind of performance they're expecting, and at some cost. And I think the message I'm hearing is, look at what those technical things are you need to track. What are you trying to get out of this contract, and understand whether you're getting that or not. And earned value is a good framework to to tailor, just because it's there. But don't get too constrained with, in some of these environments, one would not call it compliant EV, but you're still fundamentally implementing the principles. I don't know, Dan, was that?
I appreciate that. I like that, and I think yes, there is, for lack of a better word, a mantra or a recurring theme. If it is measurable, if you have an output or a measurable outcome, the Department of Energy, so many students pass a test or demonstrate knowledge at this proficiency, then you have measured the results. So, in that respect.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Gordon, you're spot on.
So
I see.
let's move on to a couple other questions here. I think Robert
Please.
Stern had his hand up first. And Robert, you might have to take yourself off mute, maybe. Okay, we'll come back to Robert.
One point is, sorry, can you?
Is this Robert?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So I'm a colleague of Dan's. I used to work in EM with him, and now I'm in the Office of Project Management. And one distinction I want to make is what Dan's talking about here for EM is a thought experiment, if you will. It's not actually been adapted by the department. We use certified earned value management systems for our capital asset projects. And one of the key issues of our concern with respect to the presentation Dan's making here is this slide that's up right now. And that is, Gordon, this sets the point you were just now discussing. Earned value is great for measuring production outputs and the associated costs and effort, and planning it and tracking it. And it lends itself well in the way that Dan's talking about in terms of things like units of waste that have been processed and dispositioned. Our concern gets into LOE issues in terms of using it for ongoing operations. And there's distinctions to be made. What Dan's talking about here gets into a program that does have measurable outputs and product. For example, we process depleted uranium and change its format so that we can more readily dispose of it. And we have casks that are produced each day, and we can measure the cost of production of those casks and the rate of time that it takes to do it. Those kinds of operations would lend themselves well to earn value, and there are ways.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right. I also saw Dave Ingalls raised his hand.
Hey, Dan. Yep, Dave Ingalls, Augur. So I wanted to get back to the original question. And, the original question was, is this a framework that could be applied in the DevSecOps environment? And in my opinion, the answer is yes. So I supported Dan in the IBR he had mentioned early on in this presentation from this past spring. And some of the concepts that we were bringing to bear in terms of how we identify the measurable products and how to quantify earned value was leveraged on some of our experience in the IT agile software development, DevSecOps environment. So I do think there's some synergy there, and I do think there's some concepts that can be bridged between those two arenas. Again, as the last caller, the last speaker said, as long as there's a measurable product to be evaluated.
Yeah. No, thank you. And this dovetail, both Rob Stern and Dave Ingalls dovetail, their questions and lines of inquiry dovetail neatly into this slide. So thank you both. Oh, sorry, I pushed ahead one slide too many, fat fingers.
So we
All
just
right.
got a few more minutes, so and then what we'll do is wherever you're at, people can stay on for after a little bit, but
Okay.
so.
All right. I will speak as quickly as a New Yorker can. We've got path forward, minimizing level of effort. Very often, discussions of operations activities or EVM for operations has been stymied, where people are just saying, look, we have set number of people, we have set amount of money, we will produce, but it really is level of effort. And I'd like to challenge that paradigm in saying that we really should do a scrub. I am also being somewhat parochial. There is a good recommended practice from AACE, but I'm certain it exists in parallel form elsewhere, where you take all the work, you look at it and see if it can be done as discrete effort, or whether you can measure the level of effort work off of a production activity. Or, and also when you're dealing within an earned value management system, whether you can take the control account and pull out all the level of effort activities and localize them into a specific control account. Dealing with the specifics of earned value management, you can see that level of effort tends to deaden or weaken or deaden the specific measurability of a specific control account. Appropriate to Dave Ingles' question, when discussing the Los Alamos integrated baseline review, there was an example that we found very, very useful. As an example, we have safety staff, radiation safety technicians in this case, who, who have to be on point, are effectively level of effort. So you've got to pay them and deal with their hours. That is level of effort, no debate, no issue. However, these rad techs are often dedicated towards characterizing the safe transport of specific measurable items, specific casks or quantities of radioactive waste, where you need the rad tech to make sure that it is safely packaged, safely ready for transport and eventual disposition. You can take that work, pull it away as a fraction of that work, and it becomes, or it can be viewed in terms of earned value technique as apportioned. Therefore, the RAD safety technician activities relating to the disposition of radioactive waste can be discretely measured. All right, rushing to the deadline. The last point I want to bring up is tailoring an earned value management system. This is something which is very often like the old joke about the weather. Everyone discusses it, but very few people do anything about it. Tailoring is a very challenging aspect, but it is out there and it is necessary to take a look at the specifics of your project. Bluntly, one size does not fit all. Department of Energy and Department of Education, despite having the same acronym, have very different missions, very different requirements, and an EVM system for one project within Department of Energy may not fully apply to another project. Same thing for other projects and programs across the government and the private sector. So we have issues on rigor of variance analysis. What is your threshold at which you start reporting variances? The change control process, how complicated or easy do you wish it to be? At what level do you collect costs and measure earned value, whether it is at the work package, control account, or higher or lower levels? the nature of the specific earned value reports. And I point out to anyone, you can look at a local example on the World Wide Web from Humphreys that discusses an example of a DoD document. Within the conclusions, more or less, I have discussed earned value within operations, discussed my attempts to define capital and operations work. Once again, there is always going to be some gray area. And I've discussed some of the challenges and best practices, whether level of effort needs to be minimized. It cannot be taken as a given. Using production metrics to best use whether there is something measurable, and tailoring your earned value management systems. I believe I have 1 minute left for any questions, as well as anyone who wishes to continue on.
So thank you, Dan, and we'll stay on here for a little bit, but I did want to say, you know, look for LinkedIn. Dan and I are going to create a discussion thread so that you all can continue to interact around this topic. You know, that's what we're going to do for each of the CPM IPM series things. Is this is intended to open up some discussion, and then we'll continue that discussion through LinkedIn. And so look for that. If you have any inputs or things that you would like to offer, send them to Dan, and he will include us, the CPM as well. But let's let the discussion continue. I appreciate it. And what we're going to do is we'll leave the line open here for a bit for informal discussion, but the formal part of the presentation is over. So thank you very much. That ending was so that we could end our recording nicely and whatever. But so does any of the 27 or more folks who are still on have any thoughts or questions or ideas around this topic that you'd like to further discuss?
All right.
So I have a quick question. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but the first question that Gordon had put forth with the GAO requirements. So really there's nothing on the horizon where GAO is going to be mandating any sort of EVM on operations.
I cannot speak for the government.
Oh, well, no.
This is why I'm smiling so broadly. I will say, looking at that report, you can see GAO was very comfortable discussing the use of earned value. They were willing and fully comfortable commenting on the status and capabilities of earned value management. Forgive me for being tentative, but it wasn't, they did not say you should not, they did not criticize the use of earned value for operations. If anything, they just said, hey, you better use earned value properly. So it's so the door is fully open for GAO to further encourage or engage on that front. Just and I'm stammering just because they did not. They commented on it, but they didn't preclude. They did not prohibit. They didn't criticize the use of EVM for operations. So having said that, the door is wide open for them to look at it in the future, both within the Department of Energy as well as elsewhere.
Great answer. No, I know. I was thinking about that. Yeah, in the discussion. So no, that's good to know. Thank you.
Right. it almost goes to jokes, that which is not prohibited is fully allowed. So
Right. No, I know. Thank you.
certainly. Other questions?
This is Chris Carson. I have a quick question.
Please.
Do you think it's, I guess I'm asking you to speculate about GAO again, but GAO obviously performs audits. So if someone's using earned value in an operations project and GAO audits the program, do you think it's likely that they would then probably use this review that they had as a basis? And so I guess my question is, should we really be digging into the GAO report here and making sure that there's nothing that we're doing differently, because they might audit an existing program at some point?
So Jen, let me add something to that before you go, and then give you a chance to think about what you want to say. So this is Gordon Krantz. I mean, I was in the Department of Defense for 7 years. In fact, I owned earned value up there for 2008 or 2011 to 2015-ish. So GAO is supposed to audit against your documented standards and principles. So if you have documented standards and principles on how to manage programs, they're supposed to audit you against that, right? They may have some, discussion about whether those published principles and process and procedures are valid and that kind of thing. But it's, are they going to look at it with an earned value eye? Maybe, but they're not. The people who mandate is in, legislation. It's in, an organization's policies, that sort of stuff. And so you should look first, does it make sense to use earned value for you on things that are non-traditional, the fully development? And if it is, institute those practices across your organization. Anyway, I'm just, GAOs is a kind of an independent audit, and I know that they can raise quite a stink, but the bottom line is that you got to look internally in your own organization as to how do you best manage the kinds of programs that you have. But that's just a thought.
I would add to it. Thank you. And thank you, Chris. I would add that if you were to look, even looking beyond the specific GAO report, if you were to look at the GAO cost and schedule guide or the GAO cost guide, you will note that they discuss earned value, but they do not limit the use of earned value or the recommended use of earned value to capital projects. There, in their specific guide, they leave the door open. So I view that appropriate to the previous question as well. They discuss earned value as a general method of measuring performance. And once again, whether it be GAO or DCMA or the Office of Project Management within the department, the burden is on the government, on the owner, to best measure performance. If the current measure is inadequate or weak, then could earned value be applied to produce a cost-effective, and I emphasize cost-effective, rigorous method of measurement?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So you don't have to use earned value, but if I may be colloquial, if what you're measuring does not perform well, if it gives you crappy numbers, the burden is on you to produce something better. Does that help, Chris?
Yes, it does. Thanks so much.
Anyone?
It's open discussion here, guys, so. Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, we can we can let Dan go. Dan, I appreciate it. This was, we had, 50-ish people for, most of the time. So it had quite an audience. I do want to work with you to get a blog or a LinkedIn discussion thread together.
Sure.
Probably, we'll talk about the mechanics of whether that's on your LinkedIn and CPM, references it or whatever, but we'll figure that out. But I think that would be good to get, because a lot of people have some potentially good discussions. So.
Well, let me ask you this. Is this something where we can engage NDIA and others to help produce better guidance documents on this topic?
So absolutely, and actually, this CPM is potentially, could open up a working group to look at it, that sort of thing, either in conjunction with NDIA or independent. But so the answer is yes, and there's other possibilities as well.
Mm-hmm.
So let's further discuss that as
Sure.
approach that as well.
Yeah, I would add AACE is also potentially interested, and this is one of those cases where collaboration can be of the essence to produce the best possible product.
Absolutely. Yeah, this would actually be a really good opportunity to test out some cross-organizational collaboration. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's further discuss that, because that's a great idea.
All right, excellent.
Okay, guys. Well, we're gonna, unless anybody has any last-minute questions, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your interest, and we look forward to, we have these, weekly. There next week, the UK will be putting something on, but we've got CPM has an event 2 weeks from now, and then 2 weeks after that, and so on. Go to our website, and you'll be able to see under the events section, you'll be able to see what the specific schedule is, and we'll also, as we get them, be posting links and that sort of thing. So, thanks, Dan.
All right. Parting comment, if anyone reaches out to me, I will be glad to give a copy of the presentation and the article that I had written for AACE on this topic. So there's a more substantial documentation of this area of discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan.
All right.
Good day, guys.
Thank you so much.